Hello, Global Village. No, it's actually Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is January 11, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Thank you, Rob. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today with Flash Rosenberg. Is that the correct way to pronounce it, Flash?
Yes, that's it.
And where are you calling in from?
I'm from Harlem, New York.
How cool is that? And the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
I'd say a sense of humor because that's how you can get around whatever it is you don't understand. You can make up what it is you believe in and believe that for a little while amusing yourself until you actually can understand what you're supposed to be doing according to what would be most practical to accomplish what the goal is.
I love that. We're going to get back into humor. That is beautiful. That's one of my favorite answers. And I rarely get that. Sense of humor is really high on my priority list, too. So, what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, that's all of what I do. I call myself an attention span for hire. So that what I do is pay attention to everything. So I don't limit it. I'm interested. The reason I draw and photograph and write and perform is because I'm interested in the exact experience we're having right now, where all of those things are happening. So what I do is try to look for everything. And I think that as a photographer, that means I'm taking in things from a wide angle and then telescoping in. Then from telescoping in, zooming in to wide angle and seeing the juxtaposition of things, seeing the lateral nature of things is what interests me and where I get my information.
Wow, that again really helps on a following question, but let's finish on information for a second. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, for me, it's like clues. I think if I wasn't able to draw, I would have been a detective. I really want to try to solve something. And as soon as you solve something, there's more problems. That's why there's many episodes for detective shows, because you never really solve anything. But if you have another idea, it's almost Talmudic, where you say, well, here's one way of looking at it, here's another way of looking at it. And I sort of collect ways of looking at things, not necessarily the things or the accomplishments themselves.
You're like more form than content, but really they're equal for you. Are you saying that or
I don't really have arguments between things. That's what being a like linear would say it's got to be this or that. I think it's both
yeah.
almost all the time. You know, that that I and that's part of like I would say my problem is that I have a democracy of liking things. And so I could justify it either way.
Well, that's funny because I'm going to do a few of these at the beginning, either or this choice or that choice. And you
Mhm.
know, it doesn't have to mean that you have to answer the two choices I give, or you can say both. But Marcel Duchamp said there's no problem because there's no solution. No, excuse me, I did it backwards. There, Duchamp said there's no wait. Yeah, there's no I did say it right. There's no problem because there wait a minute.
He would enjoy it however way you wish to put it, though. That's what
I
I would
know,
like about Duchamp.
but this is horrible, man. My brain is at a really bad. Okay, there's no solution because there's no problem. That's what he said. So we are to always saying, here's the problem. Now let's find the solution. And he's saying there is no solution because there's no problem. Because as soon as you define something as a problem, then you've empowered it. You're saying, oh, it's a problem when it could just be that's the way it is.
Well, I just think there's clues.
Yeah,
That
that's what
doesn't necessarily have to be a solution. I mean, my
that's
whole life I've not solved anything.
that's the beauty. It was rooted in your word clues. And so, do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate in humans or more invented?
Say the question again.
Is this need or want in humans to collect information more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate for us to invent it. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that I don't think it's either or. I think what's interesting is that My whole sense of multiple choice has changed with the internet. You know, when I was going to school, it was A, B, C, or D. Sometimes there was E, meaning all of the above. Now, at any moment, we have about 100 things we can choose. You can click anywhere on the screen. You can answer it there, answer it there. And so instead of life being linear or either or, we now have bing, 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 bing. It's all going in many directions, it seems to me.
That's amazing. That's evokes tactile situation awareness, which is what pilots go through when their plane has been bombed in air. They have to look at all these on their panel, all these gauges, but there's no time to look at the gauges. You have to act immediately. And my
Mhm.
friend said that's what millennials have. They have a cell phone on and they're doing Facebook and they're doing something here and they're doing something there. And they're not relating to any one of them. It's tactile situation awareness. It's like getting the big picture and operating that way. Whereas, like you said, we were raised, okay, here, you got A, B, C, D, or all of the above.
Although I think that without, I went to college before the internet, before the millennials, but that when they asked what I wanted to major in, I said, I don't want to be an or an ist. I don't want to be a photographer or a philosopher or an artist or a scientist. I said, what I have is a question. It's the question I've been asking myself all my life. I'm never going to solve it, but I want to study things that help me understand it better so that I get a really high score on the SAT for the exit from life exam so I can go to like Ivy League heaven or something. And I and the question is, and I can't believe, I mean, I'm not that I can't believe, but it's like I'm not that impressed with my whole life and career, but I'm impressed that a question I had at age 18 is still my question, which is how do we know the things we know when we haven't been told?
Yeah, it's very good.
And there's a lot of things we know because we know them. And my place, as you can see, it's got stuff all over the place. And my mother had an extremely neat and conventional home. And when she came, you'd think, well, maybe she'd be critical of this or think that I should get, a more conventional couch or lamps or I don't frame pictures, whatever it is that human beings who are doing, quote, the right thing do. Um, but she had the grace to say, if the things you needed to know were in books, you could go to the library and look it up and come home and live in a house that looked like everybody else's house. But she says, but everything you need to know is right out here, all next to each other in a big jumble. And this is how you're making sense of your life.
That is music. Now, I want to get the writing on that down. How do we know the things we know
When we haven't been told.
when we haven't been told? How beautiful. What
Because we know so many things. Little kids know we have sensations. We have all this stuff um, that is awareness, and maybe nobody taught it to us.
fill in the blank? I don't know what I think until I
Am asked what I think.
good. Can humans think without language?
Oh, of course. I mean, everything thinks without language. I have turtles. I've had them for over 40 years. I saved them from being soup in Chinatown in Philadelphia when I lived there, and they're thinking all the time, and they've never said a word.
Wow. You mean that those
Well,
three
yeah,
turtles have lived the same three turtles have lived for 40 years?
yeah. Well, they will live. I mean, if you hate death, they're a great pet because these will live to 75 to 125.
Oh my.
Um, I mean, according to them, I'm the turtle word for God is Vof, VOF. I'm
Uh-huh.
the voice of food. They know me as a vibration. So I'm the vibration that comes over and gives them food and they act like they like me and I like them. So it's mutual. But I
They,
do think that I mean, I communicate with everything in my place. Everything makes sounds. It's almost like I'm in a Betty Boop cartoon and things are like do 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 do. You know.
what are
So
your what are your three turtles' names?
well, actually now there's two. I gave one away to a cartoonist because the three after 22 years got into a fight and they had to separate them and two tanks was too much. But right now I have One is OOT, named by my 5-year-old niece at the time. She's now 39. And his name is Old Original Turtle. And then my niece said, he looks lonely. So I went and got another one. And he's smaller. And so she wanted to name him Little Turtle, Dill Dill. I said, oh no, you can't name the turtle Dill Dill. That might not come out well. So we call him Double Dill.
Double Dill.
The Little Turtle.
Got it. And then what was the third one's name?
Oh, he was Sparky, and he sort of wasn't with it from the beginning. And so Molly, the niece, she looked at him and she goes, maybe if we gave him a snazzy name, he'd get with it. But he never really got with it. So his name was Sparky.
Now, back to language. Chomsky says that language is not just words. It's culture, tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Flash, what do you do when language doesn't work, when it breaks down?
Well, I was an exchange student in France, and my language. I remember like lying in bed at night, giggling, thinking everybody here thinks this is a Lee, but I know it's a bed. Ha 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 ha. Like I think that drawing is the way that I make language. I mean, what I do is listen to people talking and make it into a picture because I think that's how I understand the information that comes into me. So I'm seeing a sequence of pictures. I mean, an example is I told a main stage story for The Moth, and I had the hard time memorizing it because I'm always thinking of new things to say or another perspective. As I said, I have this lateral thinking thing going on. And the host of the show said, well, why don't you draw it from point to point? And then I could know it. So for me, I mean, I go by what Jean Cocteau said. I love this quote where he said he would draw until the drawing was, he would write until the words were insufficient. So he had to take the line and make it into a drawing. And then the drawing didn't quite say exactly what he needed to say. So he had to come back into words. So to me, I just see that like a handwriting that leaves the alphabet, goes into something that's another kind of specificity, then comes back to words.
Oh my God. I thought I was one of the only people who quote Jean Cocteau. So he wrote until the words
were insufficient.
Then he would draw till the word
until the drawing was too abstract, and in order to make sense to others, he came back to words.
That is
that may not be verbatim, but that's the sense.
No, that helps a lot. I really need to look into that because it reminds me a little of this. If you can't say it, sing it. If you can't sing it, dance it. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like we got to draw it in there somewhere.
Yes. I'll be the ambassador for the let's draw it.
If you can't say it, sing it. If you can't sing it, dance it. If you can't dance it, draw it.
Yeah.
Here's 2 questions from Alan Turing, 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I mean, I think you think with everything. I don't think it's just the soul. I'm thinking with my feet if I stub my toe. I'm thinking with my arms when I, raise my hand to volunteer. I mean, so I think that, this is almost the way I view laughter. Sorry to swerve this way, but when I do humor, and I was told once by a producer, your jokes are funny, but the timing's off. That's because I wasn't delivering it in the conventional male humor joke stand-up comedian guy going, it's funny, it's funny, it's funny now. I would say something and it'd go, well, that's funny. Well, that kind of reminds me of when it's funny. No, now it's funny now. No, now it's really funny. Oh, and now I'm ready for it to be funny again. That's what women's humor is. It's biologically laughs like a woman. So when I'm doing a piece, not all the laughs are in the mouth. Sometimes your knees are laughing.
That's good. I like that. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
They think like machines. They have their own mechanism of thinking because they have a thinking that is probably more functional than my thinking. Because, I think now that they're very clever because when I was young, when things broke, they looked broken. Now we have a lot of machines that look great and they're broken. How could that be?
It's
I don't
funny.
think we're in competition. I think we're in connection with them. That we just think, well, how can I not have to do that anymore? Oh, good, a dishwasher. So we are thinking with them. We're ventriloquists for the machines.
That is good. It reminds me, I made up an aphorism when I was a kid. It's goes, if it works, break it the American way.
Very
and
good.
then and then years later I discovered McLuhan said, if it works, it's obsolete.
Oh,
Which is
good. I must be obsolete.
yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Yeah, and again, I know it's both, but is consciousness there bubbling away and we're kind of detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Well, I think again, it's sort of like the Boswell and Johnson. I mean, the consciousness is already there. You are born and you're conscious. And then as we get more tools for communicating, we become able to harness it and do our best, like we're doing now, to share what it is we may think or experience. But again, I think that they are just buddies. It's like if you're on a merry-go-round, is the merry-go-round me riding the moving horse, or is the moving horse riding me? We're doing it the same way. We need both.
Yeah, that's the Yeats poem about how can you tell the dance from the dancer, you know. Um, yeah, every Thursday morning I pass this building on my bike and there's a logo for some art company and it's very simple stick figure drawing a box around themselves and it's one line. So they have the pencil in their hand and the line comes back around and it's like it's all one line. The stick figure and the box. So you brought up the word tool. That was perfect timing. You must have ESP because Audre Lorde, the great poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
New tool to do. I mean, to
Here's the thing. When I ask some of my questions with these cute quotes beforehand, you can put them into context if you want. So it can mean, what new tool do you suggest to dismantle the master's house? Or you can just put it in the context, what new tool do you suggest in any context?
well, and then because I think laterally, I guess, or however it is I think, maybe in zigzag and loop-de-doos, I just thought I would just the tool I would use to dismantle the house would be to install a pool. And then I would not be in the house. I could be swimming, and I really like swimming.
Oh, that is a great answer. And so now I just added this like 2 interviews ago. What new toy do you suggest?
I mean, everything I own is a toy. I mean, maybe I have to de-toy something, but I mean, that's what it is. This is my playpen I have full of
Yes.
toys. And that's the thing, like people think art supplies are too limiting.
Yeah.
Everything is an art supply. Everything can, because when I do my animations, my hand is often in it, and it's like puppetry of drawing. It's not just the pen in the hand that makes the drawing. It's anything that I'm shaping and if I'm crunching up aluminum foil or spreading it out. Like so everything here is getting ready to be something else. So if anything is something I can play with, I guess it's all a toy.
Beautiful. I love the word toy and I love the word play. And especially you brought it into that environmental word, ground. It's like the playground. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Well, I don't really go to bed. I reluctantly fall asleep because I think I'm going to still be awake. I'm still going to get something done. And I guess if I had to worry about anything, I just, hope I get back up.
That's great.
No, I learned how to sleep from a doll I had. When she was sitting up, her eyes were open. You lay her down, her eyes closed. Very easy.
Very easy. That is a good suggestion. So, Marshall McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about them. So I asked the question Marshall continued to ask his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though artists are broadcasting them to us?
Yeah. Well, I think now we're all on Wi-Fi. In the future, somebody's going to say, "What is he talking about when he said an antenna?" Unless
That's
you're
right.
thinking, uh-oh,
Metaphor.
we froze. Are we still here?
Yeah, we're still here. If sometimes servers will have a little glitch. So
Okay. All right.
yeah,
All right. No, we were playing freeze tag for a minute.
yeah, that's all
The,
right. We all became Marcel Marceau, and people like
yeah. So I'm
it's
sorry.
not as
I thought, oh
not
no.
as bad as that one. When that happens, then you really got to worry.
Well, you're in California. You're on the other side of the country, so things could be upside down. That's
Yeah,
fine. You just
but
asked me.
actually, Flash, we're on the other side of the country, but Rob, who's our host, is in Canada above us. So it's like we're formed this triangle. So who knows what the servers are doing? They're
Right.
just
Right.
ping pong with us.
Okay. Remind me the question now.
So why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, a lot of people are invested in doing something the right way, the conventional way, and therefore it's not like they're going to think, wow, artists have it figured out. Most of the time, uh, people will think, well, I haven't figured it out. you know um, I mean, there was a story when my niece was 9 years old, and she was just about a different niece than the turtle naming one. She was just coming out of her egocentricity, and she lives in Delaware and knew I lived in New York and had an idea that maybe my life was a little different. And she went, Aunt Flash, what's in the front yard where you live? And I said, buildings. She said, well, what's in the backyard? I said, buildings. She goes, well, where's the yard? Under the buildings. She says, well, I have got to come see that. And her father was a little nervous because I'm rather unconventional. I don't, and he thought maybe, I wasn't responsible enough to take care of his 9-year-old daughter. And he said to me, I don't see how anyone could be as old as you are and not have a house, a car, a husband, or a job. And I went, lucky? I said, I don't need I don't need a house because I live in a building. I don't need a car because I take mass transportation. I don't need a husband because I have lovers, and I don't have a job because I have work. So she got to
Wow.
come and visit.
How cool is that? You're the aunt that everybody wants and needs.
I'll be your aunt if you need an aunt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're a lot more than that too. So, do artists have a moral obligation?
Um, Depends upon how. I mean, moral. I think we have an obligation to live the life as we see it as best we can without being a burden to anybody. To have clarity, if that's what morality is. A clarity about it is based on information, science, facts, with imagination sort of coordinating with it. So that to invent something, but not lies, to invent another perspective. Now, another perspective then is like a scientific inquiry without having to conduct a control group for the experiment. But I do like experimenting. I think that if I was coming along now, I probably would have been a scientist, because I think the scientists are at the forefront of a lot of new ways of thinking about things. And one of the ways I feel like I used science in my perspective, not necessarily my, I'm not trying to diminish science by saying I did something that was too inexact, but I taught a course called Future Nostalgia about documenting the anticipated past. So, as a photographer, we're always capturing ourselves in time. Like all the pictures I shot in the past, they're more interesting now as images of a time period than they are of even what I was trying to express in the 70s. And so, to me, it's just under, where you are. I don't think there's a morality in that, something holier or more sanctimonious, because morality has an odd tinge to it of something that is purposeful. Of course, it's a purpose. So if being moral is having a purpose to what you're doing, well, yeah.
Wow, you anticipated a lot of questions upcoming. That was good, but it really evoked Wyndham Lewis said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. So, be here now, and it's a detailed history of the future. I really love that. And it's sort of like captured your simultaneity, kind of all at onceness that you evoked with what you just said. And Wyndham Lewis was the hidden ground of McLuhan, who wrote his book called The Laws of Media, The New Science. He called it the new science. It's almost like a joke because he wanted to get legit, because he was like, well, let's study how pencils have changed humans, or let's study how TVs have changed us, because our books have changed us, because we tend to invent something and then we just embrace it, and we don't really know how it's shaping our behavior. We know how it's like helping us on the surface, and then we don't like everything about it, but there's other deeper things that it's changing our behavior. So I was wondering, we do these 4 questions, which is called the new science. So here's your chance to be a scientist of the future, as an artist, as scientist. And just let's call it the pencil, which is a tool you've used a lot of your career. And we're not asking for the obvious, like if I say, what does a pencil enhance? How would you answer that? Not what a pencil was intended to do as the invention, but how has it shaped the behavior deeper level? What does a pencil enhance?
Well, you can't sharpen your finger, so you can get a better drawing with a pencil. I think that's part of it, but that's the silly answer. But I'm not even sure it's about the tool. I might hijack the question a little to
Yeah.
answer it circuitously, in that I'm not a religious Jew, but going to Hebrew school really affected how I looked at life. So
Yeah.
therefore, I honor it. Um, what happened is the first day of school, I was taught to read, and books went the way that they open up and you read from left to right. Right after that, I went to the Hebrew school, and books opened up on the other side and you read from right to left. The next thing you know, we're studying men in bathrobes leading the people. They look like my dad at night. I figured they went home and put on a suit and tie and went to bed. Then, of course, we had the days began at night, because they always said, that the days didn't start at midnight. They started at sundown and went to the next sundown. Holidays just sort of floated around and happened whenever they wanted. So they weren't too exact. And it gave me this sensation that's been very strong in guiding how it is I view things, which is everything that you think is the way, the exact opposite could happen, and it would still be all right. So the idea about a pencil, this is a funny thing to bring it up, because I'm doing live drawing. I'm somebody who still uses paper, pencil, ink, pens, paints on paper. Some of the clients want to come across as being very progressive and very modern. And even though I can readily and somewhat easily make a complex idea look like a drawing, they want somebody to draw on a tablet so it'll look more modern. And so I'm thinking, God, since cave times, people could use a utensil to draw, and now I've got to use a stylus. So so there's this whole change of everything I think that should be, something else could be happening and still be okay. The whole pandemic is like this. We
Totally.
thought we thought we had to have this or that, or go here or there, or see this person on that date. And guess what? All of that suspended, halted, and we're still all right. Those of us who are healthy and fortunate in that regard.
It's really well put. You sort of encompass the whole 4 questions of the tetrad. So what the second question is, what does the pencil displace or render obsolete? And just so you get a chance, if we were doing it on the car, a automobile makes the horse and buggy obsolete. It doesn't mean they're gone completely, because you still have horse and buggies in Central Park, and it's an art form. It's a romantic stroll through the park.
Mhm.
So what does the pencil render obsolete or displace?
Um, I, I mean, well, what you just said, it doesn't. It still will exist. You still, I mean, I think that it's a way of learning. Now, maybe this is because of if I write a note, even if I never look at it, it's gone through my muscles and I know it better than if I just listen or type. There's
Right.
something very physical in the sensation of drawing that helps me know things. I'm not saying everybody knows things this way, but that's my wiring.
That's interesting because McLuhan said everything we invent extends some humanness. So it's almost like you immediately said you can't sharpen your finger like you can sharpen a pencil. And I would say it extends the finger and then it renders obsolete muscle. What it also extends is muscles. But the third step is very interesting. What does it retrieve that we got rid of? Like, this is metaphorical. Tetrads are like hieroglyphics meet poetry. It's
Mhm.
not, when he said the laws of science, he was almost spoofing, saying we should study our tools seriously but have fun, and not just say, well, we've invented TV, you got to turn it on and you got to watch it. It's like when I asked my niece, she was watching the stupidest thing ever on TV once, and I says, "Why are you watching this?" She goes, "Because nothing else is on." Now that sounds stupid, but basically, she decided in her life to spend an hour vegging out and relaxing on the couch. It doesn't matter what's on the TV, but it looks as though she's watching the TV.
Mhm.
So just to finish up, because you sort of answered the fourth step of the tetrad with pencil, but what does this is the third step? What does a pencil retrieve? What does it bring back?
Well, to me, they're all tools to try to express the same thing. I taught a class in perception studies that was conducted entirely on the New York City subways. And people said, well, is it a drawing class, a writing class, a photography class? I said, yes, because that's the exact thing I was writing. I
Yeah.
I don't want to teach camera. I don't want to teach pencil. I'm not teaching you how to use a tool because whatever tool it is may become obsolete. Like everything I studied in graphic design, not one speck of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't use rubber cement. We don't use press letters. We don't make stats. We don't have waxers. I mean, everything isn't how it's done now. So you have to just teach somebody to love it so that whatever new tool comes along, and instead of complaining about it, see, this is what I think, as long as you don't hate it first, you have then the energy and the capacity and the heart to learn something new and not just be grumping about what's new. I like new not for its newness, but because it does add on. I can still have, as you see, my pencils all in jars behind me. I'm not giving up pencils, but I'll use any other tool that might work to make drawing happen, so that um, yeah, because I said, I used to tell people, my students, because I was one of the first women photography teachers in Delaware. When I began as a photographer, I was photo editor at Delaware Today magazine when I was about 21. I looked about 12, and I'd show up to a job or to a shoot, and everybody would say, without knowing, they were saying something somewhat insulting, like, "Where's the real photographer?" Meaning the guy.
Right.
And I was a laughing feminist, not an angry one. So I got a big kick out of this. But I learned a lot about I said, you could drop the camera on the ground and it'll press the button and take a picture. So it doesn't take that much technically to do it. But now, how is it that we see? What is it that we're trying to make pictures of? And my favorite thing to make pictures of were things that were not visible. Then you
Yeah.
had to understand how much sensation there is in what it is that we see that gives us information that is emotional and communicative and progressive and nostalgic.
Brilliant. I think really what I got is what it retrieves is perception. So the fourth step is, what does a pencil flip into when pressed to an extreme? What could it flip into when pressed to an extreme?
I'm going to give you a funny, I think you could stick it into an apple and have a caramel apple. I don't know. Like you could just
Oh,
use
that is
it.
a great answer. No, you almost said it too by saying the tablet, but that's sort of the obvious. The fun answer, which is poetry meets hieroglyphics, is you could stick it into a pencil and have a candy pen. what you said about press type really got me too, because I so miss press type, because that's where I started making flyers for film screenings is press type. And my favorite was Frank Zappa used press type wrong. There's a logo for his name and he literally didn't lay it properly. And it taught me, oh, well, press type makes it look like you're supposed to look right, and he took it and made it look misuse was viable. And I was like, oh,
Yeah. No, I mean, most of my career, it's not, I'm not particularly proud of it. I think it's out of laziness and ambition combined. I don't know if those two things go together, but that I
good.
didn't really know how to make a film. But I figured,
Yeah.
well, you need a lot of pictures. So I made a film out of 7,000 slides in 1986. I figured if you put them together, and we had 12 slide projectors and calculated the intensity of the light and the speed of it changing through the projectors. And I said, and it turned out to be a movie. And I was at a one of these film festivals on the panel, and somebody said, well, that's not really a movie. I said, well, it's not really a film. I said, but it's on a thing that Kodak makes, and the box said film. How is it not a film? So, I mean, I'm not that interested in trying to define things. In
Right.
fact, as you ask me things, I'm trying to undefine them to give
Yeah.
them more room to be seen in other ways. It's not to be evasive or cute.
Oh, it's one of the most important things I've pursued my whole life is how do you unlearn what you've learned? It's this process of there is room to unlearn and not just keep learning. Flash, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Well, the earliest one, I mean, yeah, I mean, when I was, I think about 2 or something, my mother put me to bed very early. We were in an apartment in Mount Vernon, New York, and it was still day. And I had a crib that was by a window, and I was standing in the crib and I was yelling out the window. I think I must have been old enough to talk, so maybe I was 3 or 4, and I was saying, "What am I doing here?" And my mother, we have an existentialist in the crib, because I was thinking, well, everybody's still up, walking around. How come I'm supposed to be sleeping? So that's my, and I remember the lights and shadows on the curtains and things like that. So I was always taking things in, looking at them. That's it.
Beautiful. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, definitely a blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, especially since I've had recently the experience of my mother in having dementia, and you just, if memory is just, it's, I worship it. And I became, but then it's interesting to learn about how valuable your life can be without it. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, sometimes people say, gee, I would never want to be like that. I wouldn't want to live anymore if I was like that. You know what we don't know? We don't know what we want at different phases of our life. And my mother wanted to live. She liked the air on her skin. She liked seeing the faces of her children. She always knew who we were. Um, and so she taught me a lot. In fact, the way I view it, it was the greatest gift she gave me, and she gave me a lot of great gifts. I was very close to my mother and my brother and sister and father. I'm not trying to. My mother's very democratic. If any one kid did something good, she'd say, "And I'm you too. You're all good." Um, but I always think that I couldn't imagine a world without her.
Yeah.
And when she got dementia, she left but was still here, so I could still hug her and get used to the idea of her not being present. And so
Yeah.
she prepared me at great personal sacrifice for her.
Yeah. Really, you answered that this next question's first part. The second part is tell me somebody outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, sort of a role model, just briefly, and what was that impact?
Oh, I've had I've been fortunate to have many. Um,
Well,
but I
maybe
also,
just one that stands out.
well, probably my grandfather. Is
What
that
did you get
or
from your
have to
grandfather?
be outside, I mean, outside my
Oh,
immediate
that's
family?
fine. What do you think what did you get from your
I
grandfather?
got the best writing advice of my life. He lived in New York, and we had moved to Delaware, and I learned to write at about age 5. First thing I wanted to do is write Papa a letter. So, dear Papa, I'm fine. The weather's fine. Hope you're fine. And He wrote back, he says, most people aren't okay. The weather is usually lousy. And if you're going to go to the trouble to write a letter, say something. Writing advice ever. No, he
That
was
is
like,
that is say something. That was beautiful. So you told me about the religion you were raised, and I'm curious, do you pray?
I mean, I don't, I think about things. I concentrate. I used to like the way my mother would say when I had a performance, she'd say, what time are you going on? I'll think about you. Is that prayer? It's just kind of having somebody in mind, in heart. But I'm
Yeah,
not talking to somebody and asking for deals or favors.
yeah.
But I also don't say any word is not a word. I mean, if somebody wants to call it praying, call it praying. I actually call it making a deal. I said, like I was one time hired to write fortunes for the cookies inside of the Franklin Institute, a science museum in Philadelphia. And I always thought things should have like an if then clause. So I said, if you give 50 cents to the next person you see who has blue eyes, your wish will come true.
That is cool. I love that, making the deal. So if God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I made a mistake. You're still alive.
You are good. That is a great line. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I mean, I'd like to think that that people are used by evil, so that because I'm basically a pathological optimist. I mean, I do think that people are basically good, and I get prickly when people say, "Oh, Americans are so awful," and I go, "No, I'm an American. You're an American. I'm talking to you. We're not awful, But evil is when there's like a psychosis involved. And I think that's something that's going to really be in the future. We'll be able to figure out what to do with malignant narcissists.
Yeah.
That right now we are victims of people with traumas that they can't understand, and therefore they're acting them out in ways that are harmful to those of us who aren't quite as beleaguered by some kind of sociopathic or you know grip.
It's really well put. I really appreciate that answer. I agree. And how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And this one I'll set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, that's basically the line for people who's, no more mentioning of the former president's name. I'm belligerently upset by all the attention that if you say something idiotic, all the news people are running to it to repeat it. I said they should put it on page 120. I mean, what I used to like, I used to subscribe to the paper edition of the New York Times, and they would have the special sections like the science section or the food section or the style section. And because they would put the delivery sticker on the special section, since that was printed ahead, the news was in the back. Now that's the way I want the news.
That's
The people
good.
that they cover that this person did this awful thing and said this ridiculous thing, and that gets so much attention. And
Yeah.
that's not where I pay attention, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't be informed about it, because you have to be aware about what's going on. So it's not like I'm saying it shouldn't happen. Yes, we need to know what people who have authority and power over us are doing so that we can perhaps rescue this wonderful nation of ours from people who are hell bent on ending democracy. But I, now I've lost my place.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and you pretty much answered it. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy?
Oh, here's another one. Well, people, I don't know if they're enemies, but I know a lot of people who think so differently from me. And then I just try to make, if I can get there and not match their anger, not match their rage or their contempt for me. And then I can write it down and say, those are lines I never would have thought up, and then figure out how to make it be funny.
Yes.
So I mean, my armor is trying. If I forget to be laughing at somebody who said something absurd or even mean, then like I always liked, there was Jerry Spence, who I'm surprised to be quoting, but he said something really interesting. As soon as you raise your voice in an argument, you've lost. What you
Oh
have to
yeah.
do is listen carefully and figure out how you can say what it is you are trying to say in a way so that the person who is thinking differently from you can understand it and come around to your superior way of viewing things, that way.
It's really well put. And so, what first? Oh no, here's the next one. James Joyce was running a cinema in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
Well, we do, but then what I like is that you can make it more concise and quotable if you make it, or that, especially now, we have our attention spans have gotten so short. We want this clipped. I mean, I'm interested in the timing. That's what theater matters to me, in terms of how long does anybody have to pay attention to this? Like, this is sort of luxurious because most interviews are 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You're a bite. You're serving a whole meal by having an interview like this. And so,
We're having a feast.
we're having a
That's
banquet with a
that's
smorgasbord. Yeah.
that's a banquet. That is beautiful. I love your attitude because timing is so important. This whole thing about my friend in New York taught me the industry standard to listen to anything. He's a musician or watch a clip is 10 seconds. And I know mine now is like 2 or 3. I'm sorry. I know it's whittled down, but I'm being trying to be discerning. And, like when we grew up, we'd listen to an album, we'd put the album on and listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But we become, changed our taste, but the time factor was really beautiful. What you brought up, that sense of it, in knowing that you have room to move, sort of, in there's some space there, really important.
Well, also I'm thinking about theater. Like, I I live my life as if everything is important. Now
Yeah.
that can get in the way because then you don't focus on the thing that gets the attention, that gets the write up, that gets the review. But one time people said to me, where do you do your comedy? I said, wherever I am.
They wanted you to say this comedy store on this night at
Yeah, well,
yeah.
this was something that when I had my first director, and I was doing a show with another woman who was, it's a very common thing. She was jealous and superior. Like, so she would tell me, like, I was nervous about taking up too much time when I was first performing, and so she would say, well, don't take up too much time. And I would get even more nervous and clenched and all this. And this director said to me, she says, you've got a much better life. She said, this woman, she's only happy when she's on stage. She says, you're happy all the time when you're not on stage. You have better odds.
That is beautiful. So, what first attracted to you? I mean, just walk us through drawing and photography. I know you're so many things, performance, the humor is such important in the laughter. But at some point, is your parents giving you pencils, encouraging you to draw? And then what I'm asking for is the tipping point where you says, "Oh, I can pursue drawing as a career. I can pursue, you know, photography as a career." That sort of like where you went to where you what you pursued in college and where was those tipping
Yeah.
points?
Well, the thing is, all children draw.
Yeah.
And my mother she was an early childhood educator, and she was sort of impressed that I was drawing full things very early. Like, I made noses look different I bypassed stick figures for some reason. And so she was always saying, and I was looking out of the stroller, looking at everything, looking and looking. And I mean, my first drawing sale was about at age 5 because somebody was coming to install wall to wall carpeting. And I thought this was such a big thing that I drew men in top hats and tuxedos coming to hammer in the carpet. And they used this for their company ad.
Oh,
But because I thought this was like the most elegant, luxurious, like fancy thing that was ever going to happen to us, is we were going to get wall-to-wall carpeting in our ranch house in the suburb, in the suburbs of, like, it was like a Levittown built community in Newark, Delaware. And so I just always was drawing, and I just I most and this is I teach drawing now. I love people who think they can't draw and say everybody can draw. You could draw in second grade. It's just that at one point people get the message that if you're not good, you shouldn't do it. Well, I never had that message. And then what happens is when I was drawing, we used to, before you could Google images, you had to keep these swipe files, like magazine photos of somebody looking like this, of a child, a cow, a pig, so you could refer to these things to make the drawings. And I thought, if I took photography, I could take a picture of the thing I want to draw. Also, I really disliked figure drawing, not because of the nakedness, but I thought these poor people, they're cold, they're up there. Why don't we just take a picture and draw from that? So I thought I would take photography, but then I liked the speed of photography. And I also liked that people believed photos were real. So I could do all these staged photos. And I mean, I did a photo sequence. That's what I was doing because they were more like cartoons without me consciously thinking they were cartoons. But it was a white Pinto and a dark Pinto because it was black and white. And they're going down and they park right there on a highway, jump out on the median strip, hug and kiss, get back in their cars and drive off. Because that's what I thought happened in relationships. And somebody at a gallery actually said to me, it was like 7 or 8 frames for this thing, said, "Wow, you must have had to wait there a long time to catch that." Because they didn't understand that we were setting these pictures up. It was long before Photoshop, where now we doubt almost everything we see. So I liked photography, but then I kept drawing because the same way you say nothing replaces the pencil, photography did not replace drawing. I just liked that photography was better at making things look realistic. I've never had a big thing of saying, I've got to draw as realistically as possible. I said, no, there's cameras. That frees me up to make drawing be whatever I need it to be.
you utilize all the mediums. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Now, and then what happened was I made this film with the 7,000 slides, and I realized when I saw it at the end that every drawing had a caption, ding, 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 that I didn't understand the timing. And so I thought the way to do that would be for the next piece that was in the works, perform it, read it or recite it in front of people and watch the words land on people. Well, watching words land on people meant you had to simplify how you phrased it. It got rid of all that extra flubber that people who can't write go on and use too many words to say the same thing. And if it was too hard to pronounce, simplify it. So by talking, I learned to write. But the talking then also taught me to perform. And so all of them go together. You can't make an animation without writing the script, drawing it, understanding time, and having the technical capacity to do it. And so I'm always like going, ugh, when people say, well, you do all these things, which one do you do?
Yeah.
All of them. It's like, oh, let's say you have 4 children. Which one do you like? Maybe all of them.
Well, you really reinforce advice one of my friends taught me years ago. He says, don't specialize. Whereas we're all taught to specialize. What are you going to be when you grow up? And you're going to say this line, and then you might become this. So, a screenwriting teacher told me great art or great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film or great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
My intention is to get the work done. That's, I mean, because I'm very childish or childlike. That I'm like the person who bought fabric, imagined the dress and never sewed it. So like a lot of it is the sheer playfulness of having the idea sometimes accomplishes it before I actually have a chance to show it to you because I didn't make it. So that's something I have to wrestle with. The same way that I had a very wise person one time tell me, well, this is very nice of you to say, I don't know, nice might not be the word, but it's ambitious to say you draw and photograph and do this and this and this. So, but now your talents are too wide and you can't go through the keyhole so somebody can know who you are and what you do. So therefore, you haven't achieved the kind of notoriety or people don't know what it is you do. So therefore, you're at a certain level of not being recognized for what it is you do. And that was why it was really meaningful when I got the call from the Guggenheim Fellowship Committee that said I had received one in film and arts, because they said, the director of it said, you're the kind of person we hope we could give this to sometimes, who isn't working so hard to do one thing over and over and over again in order to get known for that. And I've received a lot of criticism or scolding for not trying to keep more focused and do one big thing. And so I sometimes worry about that. I'm not completely confident that I've always chosen the right thing, but I also feel like I can be an example for keep on going, do what's true to you, and it'll emerge in your lifetime or it won't.
Dude, getting a Guggenheim, that's really congrats on that. And really, now to bring up my Jean Cocteau quote is, you said, when you create your first piece of art, in your family or your teacher or your critics come up and say, well, it's really good, but you should focus more on that. Take that criticism and exploit it for the rest of your career.
Mhm.
That was Cocteau was a very wise person.
Oh, yeah.
And he was very open to many art forms like you. So the follow up to that, and I'm going to slip this light on really quick so that we can see each other a little better. Sorry about that. And
It was
Duchamp said,
already dark here when we started to speak, so the lights were
yeah,
already on.
um, Marcel Duchamp said, there's no art without an audience. What role does the audience play? How much are you thinking of them when you're making your art?
Well, I think about if I can make it clear to myself, it'd probably be clear to everybody else because I'm not that smart. Like I mean, I don't actually try to craft it to think who the audience is. I know a lot of artists do that because that may be a way to make more money, to think about its commercial impact, who's going to buy it, how many are going to buy it. I sort of think, did it help me get another clue? It's part of my detective journey more than it is, but it doesn't mean I don't care what the audience thinks. I mean, I live to communicate. So if I'm not actually get clear. I mean, one of the things that's upsetting is when I've said something as clearly as I know how, and I have somebody who's too busy thinking of what they're going to say, so they don't actually understand what I just tried to convey. But then I think, well, that's all right. I'll try to say it another way.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a challenge. And I asked filmmaker Michael Apted 40 years ago, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Because this is when MTV came in. Most people not knowing that rapid montage started in 1922 with Abel Gance in France, but it really flourished in the 80s with MTV. And he said, because we've learned to take in information faster. Even Marty Scorsese said he's cutting his films faster than because of MTV. Can humans literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Well, I'm convinced we can. I mean, we have much more that we have to pay attention to now than when I was younger. Now maybe it's because I have more memories, but I think that we can. I don't know if there's a moment when you say I'm overloaded, but I think that a sense of collage, a sense of different inputs, I'm I also think that the MTV wasn't so much even attention span, but the heartbeat of the music. You had to make images be syncopated with the way the song was. So maybe the music made us have a different attention span because it wasn't as languid or as soft as it might have been. But I like all kinds of music. I like all kinds of speeds. But I do know that that like I prefer watching movies now on my little iPad because it's got that 10-second fast forwarding and I can go like I just want to know what's next. And if they're kissing too long, I'm, all right, you're kissing now next, you know. Um,
I love it. And so the hidden question here, Flash, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
I, you're asking me, yes, because that's what I specialize in. Because I don't think of it as multitasking. I think of it embracing everything that impacts us.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's this or that. You know, like so. I think we just have different qualities. I mean, when I'm cooking, I have to pay attention to that, or I might leave out an ingredient. When I'm writing something, I have to get into that flow. Oh, here's an interesting example of it: is that I was asked to write an essay about the Delaware art scene in the 1970s. And I just was having such a difficult time with it because I was trying to type it on the computer. And I realized that correcting it, putting in a new word, correcting the typing, doing another sentence, and cutting and pasting, that was not the mentality of life then. And I went to another part of the studio on the kitchen table, got out a notebook and hand wrote it because then it was linear. Then it was the way film was one snap after another and you didn't see it till the end. And to be in that time frame gave me a better way to write about what it was like to live then. I don't know if that
Wow.
answers it, but
No, that was really well done. You really get what I'm after, and I really appreciate it. You're articulate and fun, and you're really enlightening me with who you are. I'm curious what you think the motive of the cave artist was.
uh, oh, I think it was probably part of storytelling. This is what happened today, honey. I saw a buffalo. You know, like I mean, and they didn't have maybe the you know they pay attention. And I think that the idea of trying to capturing your experience, it's as natural as remembering something that happened, and to
Yeah.
draw it was a way of collecting it and putting it somewhere. You know, that's what that in fact I've used this as an art when somebody says, "What do you mean you don't draw on a tablet?" I said, "Drawing with an instrument like a pen or a pencil has been happening since cave times. Suddenly this isn't the right way to do it? Huh?"
Yeah. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, it's I think it's laughing at things. I mean, my favorite thing about being human is that you can think a thing and nobody has to know it because I have so many snide remarks in my head at all times. You know, it's almost like the Mad Magazine thing where they used to say they would have famous quotes and then the rest of the line, like they said, like Teddy Roosevelt said, you know, speak softly and carry a big stick. But actually, what he said was, speak softly and carry a big, sticky, gooey ice cream sundae to me because I'm hungry. You know, like I always think that I finish sentences, I do this. I mean, it's very busy inside of me. That's why when people think I'm not doing anything, oh, I said, oh, you don't know how busy I am.
Oh, God. I got to tell you, a couple of my favorite Alfred E. Newmans. The English language is the only language where a double negative is a no-no.
Yeah.
I mean, we grew up with some great comedy writers, Mad Magazine, and then there's no. I've studied all the great literature of the world, but the greatest book ever written is stupid, snappy answers to stupid questions.
Yes. Al Jaffe is brilliant. Yes.
It's really great stuff. I appreciate that. Is perception reality?
Reality is overrated. I mean, I think that it's whatever, you know, I think of reality as scientific truth, you know, about so the facts of vaccinations and things like that is reality, but there's this sort of celebration of the hope for what might be a reality. And that's as much reality as what passes for reality if you have a lazy mind that only sees things the way you think they should be.
Wow. I want to go back to laughter. That was fun. You brought that up, and I'm curious. What's the function of laughter?
Um, it's to me, it's like a stereo way of understanding things. You can only laugh if you know, quote, the right way it should answer, but then you've come up with this other one. And it's a way of understanding how pleasant it is to have words and other ways to say something, and how it is to have shared experience. We laugh when we understand that a person has just said more succinctly something we actually have experienced or thought or wondered about or were annoyed about. And I think it's the great, they always think Rumpelstiltskin, what was it, putting straw into gold? Taking how sad you are and helping yourself laugh about it, that to me is the real alchemy. And I mean, here's the thing, like, I can tell you a great moment of, like, one of the saddest moments of my life was when I was forced out of a loft that I loved. And they were going to come, and they'd already begun drilling on the roof and asbestos abatement, and I had to get out. And my father was dying. And what happened is, as the van was pulling out, and the only thing in life to do was to get in the subway, meet the van so it could unload in my new place in Harlem. And I was a wreck. I've been awake for like 5 days. I've been packing. It was just so sad. I couldn't go home and be with him because I had to do this move. And as the truck is pulling out, he dies, And so I'm at the place with the movers bringing in the stuff, and all the boxes are labeled, but the mover says, "Hey lady, where do you want this box?" At the moment that I'm in deep conversation with the rabbi about where my father's going to be buried. And so he says, "Where's your father to be buried?" And the mover asked me this question, and I say, "In the kitchen." And the rabbi laughs. He says, "In the kitchen." I think Dad would like to be buried in the kitchen. I mean, it was one of his favorite places. And so if there can be something funny at a moment that serious,
That's
you
great.
survive,
Yeah, that's
you know?
great. That is a beautiful, because I was going to ask you about, well, Gurdjieff says laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. But Steve Allen taught McLuhan that behind every joke, there's a grievance. But I like to even drop the word every. Behind jokes, there's a grievance. Any comment?
I don't think any joke. Sometimes it's just that you're having the wink of being tuned in together. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think of it as this is as the ultimate beauty tip, really. Like, people think, you can forget the creams, the lotions, the surgeries, the exercise, the diet. The way to appear beautiful is to make people laugh. It's a physiological fact. When people start laughing, their eyes get really squinty and they can't see very well. So if they look at you while they're laughing, you look great.
It's beautiful. I love that. McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyson, saying that everyone has these amazing abilities to create scenarios in their sleep that are like just amazing. You dream. Everybody dreams, but artists, not to be elitist, artists also dream while they're awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process?
Absolutely. I
And
mean,
anything you could say, like a specific dream, describe it that's reoccurred, or anything on that?
well, the first film I made is based on 50 dreams. I had a paper and wrote them all down, and it was about the story of falling in love for the first time. The name of the film is Pulse of Desire. I keep thinking someday I'll do the sequel called Repulse of Desire. But no, and it's findable on Vimeo if somebody wants to look up Pulse of Desire. It's a 28-minute, experimental short. And so, I mean, dreams pay, yeah, I mean, and I do think that we dream a lot while we're awake. I mean, when my mother had dementia, I kept thinking, I wonder if she goes to sleep and everything makes perfect sense, and that
Right.
she's now alive in a dream state.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is great. Yeah, because my father died that way too, and I was like with him in for like 8 days, and it was just amazing. I'd say, "Dad, you want to go eat?" He goes, "Yeah." I goes, "Dad, you want to take a nap?" He goes, "Yeah." I says, "Dad, it's time to go to bed." He goes, "Yeah." I says, Man, we have similar lifestyles. This is great. Eat, nap, and sleep.
Right. Well, I always wanted to change the name of it. I thought dementia is a terrible word for it because people would say, oh, she's demented. She was
Yeah.
not at all demented. She was in, I just add an end to it. She was in a new dimension. She just lost one of the laws of physics. She had lost the sense of time, but she still was completely in this world and had kind of achieved. I mean, how it's hard to get rid of a dimension.
Yeah. And it's also returning to childness. And we're trying, as artists, you're trying to be childlike your whole career. And so now at the end of your life, you're returning to child. You don't have to worry about all the adult stuff. It's like,
well, maybe I'll be spared it because I never stopped being childlike.
Right. That's a beautiful trait. Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
All day.
Name one.
Name one impossible thing. I mean, I don't know if it's impossible, but sometimes it sounds impossible and it is possible is what I like. Like today, it's like 18 degrees in New York. I said, it's too cold to go for a walk. I'll go swimming. Like that seems impossible, but there's an indoor pool. It's heated. It's better than walking. I mean, so it's impossible and possible. And those are the things I like.
That is great. That's beautiful. Sun Ra has this great line, the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Well, I always think of myself as a possibilitist.
Nice.
And then and of course, this interferes with being able to make decisions because if you make a decision, then a lot of other things become impossible. Yeah. Like if you marry someone, then dating that one's impossible, right? So if you are always in possibility, you are not then in a strategy to make a definite decision. I'm not saying that's better. I'm just saying it's kind of a way that it could be perceived.
Yeah. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
It's funny because I don't usually like to lump groups. That's part of the striving that I have. And like, I don't like to say, well, men are, or women are, or this is. I mean, and I get into fights with people who want to do that. They still think it's funny to say, I mean, that was my going back to what I was saying about women's humor. I don't do jokes about hair, diet, bad boyfriends. I would rather do things related to my understanding of the science of the world. Like I'll say something like, I'll do shtick now. This is a flash moment. I did these little 30-second spots for 5 years on public radio in Philadelphia. And did it for a little while in New York on BAI. And it'd be like, what's the big deal about the speed of light? The speed of light has never affected me. Oh, Einstein got a lot of mileage out of it, but how fast am I talking? At the speed of talking. How is it possible to get a speeding ticket when a car can only go at the speed of car? This is more like physics according to Gertrude Stein, not Einstein. Besides, I want to know something far more difficult, far more complicated. I don't think we're ever going to solve it. I want to know not the speed of light, but the length of matter. If someone hurts you, how long will it matter?
Flash, that is great writing. That really evoked Captain Beefheart. He said, the stars are matter, we are matter, but it doesn't matter. That is really good. And you presented it well. That was beautiful. So tell me one major element of your creativeness that's changed since you started and one major element that stayed the same.
I think what stayed the same was playfulness and not worrying about the rules of any particular discipline. Like, I don't, that this is a photograph or not a photo. I mean, one of the, there was a painting show at an art museum that I submitted the work to. And I said, what % of this photograph has to be a painting for it to be accepted as a painting? And I just put a grid over the photo and painted half of it. Of quarter of it, a quarter inch square,
Nice.
like, so that kind of smart aleck playfulness has been
Yeah,
a constant. What has changed is, I guess what's changed is to keep expanding to take in another discipline. Like, it
yeah,
began with only drawing, then it was drawing and photography, then it was drawing, photography, writing, then it was drawing, photography, writing, and talking and performing. So I think it's just, like you said, nothing really goes away. Like, painting didn't disappear because of photography.
yeah,
I think personally, not any particular skill went away because I learned a new one.
yeah,
Like, even though I now type most things on the computer, I handwrite a lot.
yeah,
I like the feeling of it.
yeah. Amazing. I'm curious too. You mentioned Man Magazine. I have that tendency towards, smart alecky, but not in a condescending way, humor. Who are some of the roots of that for you growing up? Any TV or movie people or comedians you were seeing that grew up that sort of inspired you or influenced you?
Well, that I always, people in most interviews say, "What was your
Yeah.
inspiration?" I mean, the going to the hardware store and seeing all this stuff that we didn't need. What the heck is that for? You're like, so I mean, I just think going to the grocery store and,
Right.
I mean, one of some fantasy I would never, I don't think I'd ever do it, but you see people with all this stuff in their cart that you would never eat. You go, what if we just changed carts and then met in a week? Who would we be? Like, I think I'm more situational than I am in
Yeah. Then,
responding to the world than I am about. That's why I always thought art history was. I took a course in sort of in self defense to say, because they were always wondering, well, which artist influenced you the most? I go, well, once I learned about their artwork, but usually I was already doing
yeah.
something in their style that I had an affinity for them, but they didn't teach me something new. I mean,
Right.
I I certainly love the work of the photographer Dwayne Michaels, but actually my mentor in photography at the University of Delaware taught me much more because he said, you need to do it as you see it best.
Right.
I mean, I
And you,
loved Aubrey Beardsley drawings. I liked
oh,
reading Henry Miller and Anais Nin. I liked reading Italo Calvino. I liked reading books and imagining them as pictures. So I don't know if there was, um, I mean, I like Jean Cocteau, of course. I mean, Blood of a Poet was significant for me because that was such a strange movie. And it was strange because it was how I thought, and I'd never seen anybody make something that was that dreamlike. I go, wow, you can make images of things that you feel and know that they have a look, even though you've never seen them. And so that's the kind of artists I particularly liked. I also like Maxfield Caulfield, who had these amazing paintings. And so I just, you know, I mean, I had one and only job. I had a job at the Delaware Art Museum in the late 70s for about 3 years. And they have a big pre-Raphaelite collection. And I'd, be going to the office early before the museums would open to the public. And I'd be going through the gallery to get to my little cramped little hovel in the place. And I would do cartwheels because the poor pre-Raphaelite ladies, they just looked so sad. I thought they were tearing up. Well, because you figure that they were painted in these studios where there was food and sex and they were involved with people and maybe there was loud noise and now they're in a museum and everybody's whispering and I thought they must be thinking, what did we do to deserve being here? So my job was cheering up the art.
then you flew through on your cartwheels. So you evoke these two female comics perfectly there, with the hardware, cart with all the implements and purchasable crap, and they're Lily Tomlin's a homeless lady. She's pushing a grocery cart down the street and she goes, "People think I'm crazy for collecting this stuff. What do you think about the people who actually buy it?" And then the one I announced today that I love, one of my favorites is Phyllis Diller said, "Housework can't kill you, but why take a chance?"
That's good. That's good. Well, that's about stuff. I mean, I have a lot of stuff, and some of
Yeah,
it's because I'm at the crossroads between analog and digital, and so a lot of things I have, like, what are you gonna do? Throw your negatives out? I mean,
yeah.
but anyway, but maybe if I had the time and energy or money and had them all scanned, possibly. But I figured now people come in and anyone who says you should get rid of all this, I get rid of them. It's much easier.
Ah, way to go. And I'll give you one tip is there's many or enough college archives that would love to take your stuff. And
Mhm.
I got lucky and got some of my stuff in one. And I think you should consider it at some point because I'm
It's
sure that
under
stuff
consideration. Yeah, yeah.
it is very valuable and it is they want the stuff because they know the real 35 millimeter negatives are going to last longer than the digital because it's going to. So, anyways, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement, and he says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you've turned into a strength.
Um, well, probably my favorite art form of all is talking, you know. So I used to do these drawings before the internet, you'd have long phone calls with people. And I would always be doodling. I made portraits of phone calls. And I just like a lot of faces going, huh, well, well, I don't know, maybe we'll sleep. Yeah, and so I would do these interconnected face doodles. And I used to have this sort of smug, quiet thought that I was getting work done while I was preventing other people from doing theirs.
That's good. Face, did you call it face doodling?
Interconnected face doodles. I'll send you some samples afterwards.
Interconnected face doodles. I love that.
Trying to think if I have any nearby to hold up. Mm, I could go get one, but
Well, we've got about 10 more minutes, so this really been fun. Um, how do you find peace of mind?
um, I mean, like I don't think it's. I have to find it. I just need to nurture it because it's already in there. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I don't. I I I I feel like I can usually solve something. And I if I make anything, I'm happy. If I cook soup, I'm happy. You know,
Yeah.
if I can, it was the hard part during the pandemic was I couldn't swim for all this time. And I used to swimming was smooth. And that was my thing that kept me my equilibrium in the just the physical way because it was quiet. I didn't have to win. I didn't have to shoot a goal. I didn't have to count how many steps it was. It just was a time to be in the world in that way. And imagine that my arms are attached to my hip and my legs are attached to my shoulders, and all of me is just in the water. So that's probably as an exterior thing I might do. But mostly I find peace by thinking about something in another way. You know,
Wow. It's beautiful. It really evokes my mom too because she was a swimmer and that kept her alive for so many years. She had a bum hip and she could swim and she just swam every day, made a point of it, and you could tell that's helped her live longer. Can you forget to die?
well, dying won't forget to get me. But I mean, I have a delusion of immortality all the time. I mean, otherwise I would have gotten more done already.
Flash, if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
It's 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 funny because I think the 12-year-old self would be the one who would have to advise me.
Oh, nice. So what would she
And
say?
and she would say, "Be that person I dreamed of being. Don't waste what it is I'm dreaming of for who I'm going to be when I'm your age."
Yeah, it's beautiful. These
You're
are
very good at nurturing the response. I'm really admiring, like,
I, I I appreciate that, Flash. I've had people turn on me and they would go, quit nurturing, quit saying that was a good answer. I mean, literally. And I go, sorry, that's just how I operate. I say, that's a great word. And people are like, well, all words are great. Blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's reciprocal. It's like we're spending this time together. It's like you said, it's more like a banquet than a quick bite to eat. So,
Yeah.
these are
When you say praise, you're just peeling the grapes. Thank you so much.
hello. I mean, I think, well, I do agree a lot with you when you said people go, Americans are stupid. I was like, come on. I mean, it's I always go this. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. If all you're going to accentuate is all these other people have these weaknesses, it's not going to move the project forward, you know. So it's like Baba Ram Dass said, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush, fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving, um, or Frank Zappa said it best. He says, you got to love the cops as they beat the shit out of you on the street. It's like, whoa, people don't want to hear that one.
No, well, to quote Fiddler on the Roof, the Tevye goes, may God bless and keep the czar far away from us.
That's good. Far away from us.
It's the same as the big sticky gooey ice cream sundae. It's the other words that need to be said.
Yeah, the other words. So these are 5 quickie Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head, just a few words, brief. Who started it all?
They did.
That's good. I like it. Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
You're asking a make it person. Of course.
Where do we put it?
In our house. That's my theory of interior design. Take everything you know and put it where you live.
In your house. I love that. Who's cleaning it up?
It has to be cleaned up?
Ah, that's good. Is it serious?
I'm extremely serious about not taking it seriously.
Oh, beautiful. Which way should that's the end of the Alan Watts. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under?
Over.
Why?
Why? Because
Yeah.
that's how it is in my house.
Well, dig this. My friend has a picture of the patent that says I'm like 120 years old and it has it going over.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people who say under.
Well, my brother was on speed dating where he met his wife. Of course, they didn't know it that day, and that was his first question of the 5 questions he asked.
Oh, really?
Compatibility, yes.
That's good. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what title would it be?
What am I doing here?
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Mint.
They want to have a color other than black ink on some of the pages. What color?
A different shade of black.
Nice. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I think on the subway tracks, out of something extremely resilient, so it'd keep popping back up.
Boom. That is good. Please tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Skiing.
Nice. You're good at this. Joseph Boyce, great artist, said, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh, beat poet, said, guard the secrets, but constantly reveal them. But as Thornton Wilder in 1928, he said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm really grateful. I'm not insinuating that you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you, Flash?
Um, Constantly learning,
Yeah.
I mean, and meeting new people, and so that I can learn what it is that person has to offer to the gestalt of everything that I've been able to take in. I don't get rid of people. I don't understand that if you've loved somebody, then you never talk to them again. That just seems like, why would that ever be something to do? They're part of, you don't, nobody even recovers from their parents. You don't get over somebody. I don't understand closure. There's no closure. Everything is adding on to the great tabula rasa of your being. It's just different things are on the graphic equalizer at different volumes.
Yeah. That is a big lesson for me. Like, how do you implied forgiveness is the key. Like Mark Twain said that forgiveness is the smell that the flower releases when the heel steps on it. And so you implied you don't, how do you forgive then? You implied forgiveness is like a key.
Well, I'm always saying, well, good. uh, It's sort of like inside, I'm thinking, whew, thank goodness I'm not you. I mean, I mean, that's what I said. The great virtue is being able to say things. I mean, every now and then it slips out, and then I've said something that insulted somebody, but I try to keep it in, but I'm too loquacious, so sometimes it slides out.
What's a cultural shift you see developing today that has an impact on you?
Oh, I mean, I'm I can't wait till everybody's more accepting of people that are different than them, and that
Yeah.
it seems accelerated with Black Lives Matter. It's accelerated with my coming into it by being I know what I look like, and I live in Harlem, and then my name is Flash, and when if I call a car service to go somewhere and, they just put Flash R, and then I pop out, and I like the look of surprise on the driver's face who they're expecting like a drug dealer, and then this middle-aged, Jewish lady pops out. And I don't care if they're frightened or relieved or whatever it is, but I just like I just am hopeful for a time when we're all people and that won't, have
Yeah.
to, uh, and we don't have to have all these different ways of saying all this or that. I just I like this idea. I mean, I keep thinking that marriage. There was a recent article in the Atlantic which echoes what I think of, and I'm not saying anything negative about people who are happily married, but that I think that in the future, you can buy a house with somebody who's your best friend, then you can go in and out of love won't actually collapse your life if it doesn't work as you
Yeah.
anticipated. I mean, this is going back into shtick, but I'm saying like I don't understand marriage particularly because it's not logical. Like you don't get your diploma the first day of kindergarten. You don't get the gold medal before you do the race, before you win the race. You don't get what else? Well, you don't have a birthday before you're born. So how do you get away with saying you're going to love someone forever before you do?
Yeah.
I think the way it should work is you should just be with somebody you're so happy you're together 50 years and you go, hey, that worked out. Then you get married. The same way these other kind of significant rewarded moments are acknowledged.
No, it's beautiful thinking. It opens up and it's like just everything humans invent have services and disservices. And once we invent it, then we think, oh, well, it works and we've got to use it. And we don't. That's what I'm about is studying the hidden psychic effects. We don't know the hidden psychic effects of marriage. We've just said this is the way it is and it works. But let's go to your name because you brought it up. I mean, people must be dying to know, did your mother and dad name you Flash, or is that a nickname, or what's the story behind it?
Well, it happened by mistake. I wasn't going, "Oh, I think I'll be Flash," like it happened by accident, and then it stuck, and then I legally added it to my name. And so what happened was, as I said earlier, I was a photographer when there were not a lot of women photographers, And what happened was, in those days, women photographers dressed like miniature men. They wore denim jackets and dungarees, or they wore tuxedos to go shoot weddings or this or that, you know. And I thought, I'm not a miniature man. I'm a full-grown woman. And at the time, I was a tall one. 5'7" isn't considered so tall anymore. But anyway, I had just moved to Philadelphia. I just started teaching in the extension division at Temple University, and I was hired to photograph a little architect's Halloween ball. And I figured, well, they're kind of artsy. They said, oh, be sure to come in costume. Well, what I was doing to shoot my events was dressing a little David Bowie-ish, because this is, again, the early 80s. So I
Yeah.
wore sequins, maybe rhinestones over one eye, and people knew that I was not part of the action. And I was there, obviously, to do something. So that legitimate funny thing was dressing a little bit off, but it was fancy.
Yeah.
Meant that I was, legitimized my presence. So when
Yeah.
they said come in costume, I thought, well, fine. I mean, I have costumes, I have sequin vests, I got this, I have face painting and all. But that day, I was very busy learning more about face painting from my friend named Peanut Butter in Philadelphia. He did elaborate body makeup and face painting, and it was time to go do this photo shoot. And I thought, oh, I didn't really have a costume, but I thought it'd be really appropriate for the photographer to come dressed as a censored photo. So I put 3-inch black duct tape over each breast and over my crotch, a little thing in the middle, and had my hair in a net with flash bulbs hot glued into it with the hair poking out of the net. And I went to this thing, and I got there, and it was the society event of all of Philadelphia.
Whoa.
It wasn't a little architect's party. It was like 4,000 people were there. And I'm thinking, I should learn more about the event before I go to them. I should ask more questions. But I said, oh, no. And I was like so embarrassed because I am not va-va-voom girl. I was not like, oh, no, this was like a terrible idea, And I didn't have a jacket. It was a warm October night. So, well, I have a job to do. So I'm doing my job. And when you're doing a job like photography or watching a child, you don't have appearance anymore. You're just concentrating on what it is you have to do. And I'm doing that. It's the party's on 4 floors. I'm running all around. People are giggling a little bit, but I don't mind. I said, eventually be tomorrow. This will be over. I won't do this again. The end. Well, there's a costume contest, and there's about 100 contestants. Whole architecture firms come dressed as the Ben Franklin Bridge, and I'm crouching down, taking pictures of them all, and it's time to announce the winner. And the judges, and at the time it was Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown, who designed Las Vegas, and Albert Nippon, who was a very famous fashion designer in the 80s, and they all turn around, they look at, and they say, the photographer wins.
Oh,
Now, this is decades before selfies, right?
yeah.
So I'm thinking, I suddenly have a big dilemma. Like, how am I going to get a picture of the winner if I'm the winner? And then, the next thing, everybody's looking at me, and the MC comes over with a mic. Hey, what's your name? And I go, I can't tell them I'm Susan Rosenberg from Newark, Delaware. I don't say anything. I'm just, and somebody in the audience yells out, her name is Flash. I go, yeah, my name's Flash. And then they say, well, what's your last name? And I go, Rosenberg. And 4,000 people roar with laughter.
Oh my God.
And so almost everybody started calling me Flash. And, it just as a sort of as a joke, my students, because the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a little teeny picture, a little squib, mercifully cropped. and so it became kind of a joke. But then there were more circulated. Like Susan Rosenbergs were like the John Smith of another tribe. Flash Rosenberg was more distinct. People actually knew who it was, who was showing up. It was better on my medical records. It was all these other things. So I finally thought I better check with the authorities. I mean, parents named their children with a lot of emotion and choice and meaning for the name of the child that they've anticipated. And Susan was named after my father's mother, Sophie, using the letter S. And when I asked them, my father said, if we would have known you were going to turn out the way you turned out, we would have named you Flash. And my mother said, if anyone asked, did your mother give you that name? She said, you tell them that I gave you the spirit that earned that name. But I dreamed of a Sue. So when I say Sue, you better turn around. And so then I did it as an AKA. And so I'm known as Flash Rosenberg.
It is really a great story.
But
I'm so
it's not like, "Oh, I get mad if somebody calls me." I mean, there's people
yeah.
who knew me as Susan, it's carbon dating. They get to continue to call me Susan.
I love it. I'll keep calling you Flash. I love it, Flash. So this has been truly enlightening and fun and happy. I appreciate it. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
Um, I mean, the quote is, there's an old saying that says, um, the definition of a Jewish optimist. Do you know that one?
No, tell me.
No matter how bad things are, they could get worse. But that's the glib answer. But what gives me
Yeah.
optimism is that the human mind can keep inventing and coming up with ways that we can adjust, grow, solve problems, and the depth of love that we have for our lives and for each other and for the people that we feel a kinship with and for the just the sheer joy of seeing somebody familiar or meeting somebody new. That to me is more important than grumping. I mean, people can choose how they want to spend their awareness. Some people spend all their awareness finding fault. Yes, that means they're an alert person. Or you can spend your awareness trying to figure out what's good about the day. One of the things that's a peeve of mine, people complaining about the weather. Weather's not bad or good. It has no behavior. It's just weather. If you live in a cold place and it's cold, well, it's cold. There's no need to discuss it. Like, I just think I just wear more clothes or wear fewer clothes. It's not really a topic.
Yeah, really well put. Because I have a question in my uh, question list here that goes, are the laws of nature cruel? And it's like, no,
Well,
they're not cruel. They just,
Well, I
they,
think it's just like a bad adjustment. It's like not having enough food for a dinner party. Why make humans and then make a climate that isn't good for them so they have to get coats or air conditioning? Like, why don't we match?
yeah. Good. This has been so fun. I want to enlighten you with two jokes that really apply to what we talked about.
Okay.
McLuhan had a lot of funny jokes. And the first one is, two caterpillars are on a branch and a butterfly flies by, and one caterpillar says to the other, "You'll never get me up in one of those contraptions." And then the priest is trying to cross the Canadian border, and the custom officer sees he has a flask, and he goes, "What's in that flask?" And the priest goes, "It's water." And the custom officer says, "Let me see that." And he opens it up and takes a swig, and he goes, "That's whiskey." And the priest goes, "It's a miracle." So, McLuhan said, communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. So it's sure been new and fresh talking to you, Flash. Thank you so much.
Well, that means a great deal to me because you've talked to all these people over the years. And if I haven't made you more exhausted about the nature of talking to somebody that you've never met and now we know each other, um, I'm grateful to continue to give to your enthusiasm for doing this because it's been a great pleasure for me.
Really cool. I love your word clues too. It's like we're just searching for clues, how we can each crawl through that little green camera light and give each other a hug someday. So thank you, Flash.
Okay. Thank you.
Namaste.
Okay. Bye.